Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today what I'd like to show you is how to loosen up a tight calf muscle and keep it loose forever. One of the things that we see is with stretching and stretching muscles, we seem to be at a point now where we stretch and have to keep stretching regularly. We're not necessarily looking at stretching as a thing that we do in order to not have to do it at some point. It just seems that if you come in and have physical therapy, if you see any health professional, if you're an exerciser, we're sort of living with this idea that you have to stretch something and you have to keep stretching it in order to keep it loose and supple. But what we miss here is we seem to miss and neglect the idea of why that muscle has become tight in the first place. So I just want to cover that before we get into these exercises, because I think it's really important. So, and if you've been paying attention to the channel, you may have seen maybe a week or two ago, we put out a video on how to stretch your hamstrings and keep them loose forever. And we spoke about the link between a tight muscle and some dysfunction somewhere else that asks that muscle to be tight. So if we're consistently stretching that muscle, which in this case is the calf, if we're always doing a calf stretch, and the calf stretch that we'll go through in a little bit isn't anything special, but it's the thinking and the exploration around that which makes the difference. So again, if you've got a tight calf, we need to make sure that you've got one or two exercises that you can do that make you feel like it frees up in an instant and feels looser straight away. So you can do these before you exercise, you can do them after you exercise, you can just do them day to day, and you should genuinely feel like your calf is immediately looser afterwards. So we need the skill to be able to make that happen straight away. But then again, we need to have the conversation after that or before that that says, well, why has this calf muscle become tight in the first place? So what we'll talk about first is we'll go through those reasons and we'll chip away at some things to hopefully address those reasons, and then we'll do the calf stretch at the end. Excuse me. So one of the things that we see, and I see specifically with calf tightness, can be a reflection of two things. The first is a stiff ankle. The second is a stiff lower back. And the second part of that, the stiff lower back, often seems a bit strange because your back's all the way up here and your calf couldn't almost be further away, to be honest. But anatomically, there's nerves and a lot of sort of fascial connections between your spine and your calf muscle. So the first exercise is going to be a way to free up your lower back. Now, the sciatic nerve, which a lot of people know about, the nerve roots, the origin of that nerve is the base of your spine. And those nerves, sort of the nerve roots form the sciatic nerve and go straight down the back of your leg. When it gets to the knee, it branches off into two parts. It becomes sort of the tibial nerve, and there's a perineal sort of aspect. So a lateral aspect, or the side of the shin area, gets its own nerve. But there's a thick nerve, the tibial nerve, that goes down through the calf muscle. And what can happen is if your lower back is stiff and tight or dysfunctional in some way, it doesn't have to hurt, but if it's dysfunctional and not functioning as well as it could, it can pull a lot of neural slack and functional slack, for want of a better term, out of that calf muscle, asking it to be tight, whether that's to stabilize the nerve because the back's dysfunctional, whether that neural tension being sort of, as the back sort of stiffens and tightens and the nerve gets pulled a bit tighter, that calf muscle becomes tight as well. So the first part of this equation, in order to keep your calves loose forever, is to make sure that you're on top of your back mobility. And a really easy way to do that is either with a foam roller or a ball. Again, we've gone through how to use a ball and a foam roller to free up your back in the past, but we'll use the foam roller today. So again, we're looking at the bottom sort of section of your lower back. So right down the base where your pelvis is, but also up towards where the base of your rib cage is. That sort of section in here can get stiff and can sort of pull a lot of the slack out of that nerve that makes the calf tight. So again, we want to make sure that we figure out which one of these two things, whether it's the ankle or the back, are the main limiting factor for you. So all we want to get you to do is just gently have the roller underneath you and just recline backwards with your bottom up in the air. Now, again, you can have a pillow behind you if you want to, but the idea here is you just want to either slide your legs out or drop your hips down. And we're just looking for some areas that feel a little bit stiff and tight. So again, if you've seen these videos before, you can bias one side. So I can roll my body across to this side just to bias the left side of my spine. I can go to the other side and do the same thing on the right side. And again, what we're looking for here is you want to compare the two sides and say, well, look, which side feels more restricted, which side doesn't sink in as easier. We're not as interested in which side feels the most tender, although it can be important, but for the purposes of this, we're looking for stiffness and tightness. And then once you've decided which side you feel needs some TLC, again, it doesn't have to be the same side as a particular calf. If both calves are tight, then you might find, again, one part of your back is stiffer than the other. Once you've found that spot, we just want you to stay here. Just relax, let your pelvis sort of drop down, let the foam roller press into these stiff joints in your back. Stay here for 30 seconds, a minute, however long you feel you need to feel like it starts to give. And then once you've done that, you just want to move it up a tiny little bit higher. And you just want to keep sort of hunting up and down, looking for spots that feel stiff and tight for you, and spending enough time on them so you feel like they start to give. Now, as we've talked about before, we're not as interested in rolling up and down because we're trying to get some specific pressure on very isolated parts of the spine, which are your joints. So if you're rolling up and down over your back, you're sort of glossing over a lot of the stiffness instead of specifically pushing through sort of individual sections of your spine. So from a back mobility perspective, being able to mobilize your lower back is crucial to allowing your calves to loosen. Again, when we go through the calf stretch, we want to make sure that that calf stretch is really the icing on the cake. It's pulling back some of those layers that have been asked to be there by something else. So clearing up the lower back and then going after the ankle like we're about to can give your calf muscle permission to stay loose. Because one of the things I think we find with muscle tightness these days is because it's so common, because calf tightness is so common, we don't look at it as interesting or unusual anymore. It's just a thing that a lot of people have, or if you do have it, you don't necessarily think of it as anything that's overly threatening or needs to go away. But we know that calf tightness can be linked to a lot of other things, including knee pain, ankle pain, and a whole range of other things. So, and more importantly, it robs you of athletic function. So you just can't be at your athletic best if your calves are tight. So we want to wipe that slate clean. So freeing up your back is a great place to start. Second part of the equation is an ankle. So if your ankle bone is stiff, the ankle joint is stiff, and it's a bit rusty. So when you try and bend your shin over the top of your foot, what we basically see is if you can't express full range of motion through the joint, then the calf itself can get tight through compensation. So, and what we often notice is we see calf tightness as a limiter of ankle range of motion, but because ankle stiffness doesn't necessarily have an overt symptom attached to it, we miss it. And calf tightness has an obvious pull associated with it. People know what a tight muscle feels like, but a stiff joint just stops moving. It doesn't have an overly obvious sensation to pick up on. So we want to make sure we go after that. So again, we've gone through this exercise before with the banded calf stretch. So all we want you to do is have a band of some sort of at the base of your ankle here. In an ideal world, you'd have the band going backwards. Unfortunately, I can only attach it to something just off on the corner here. But the idea is with the band going behind us, we want to keep our foot flat, we want to bend that ankle as far as you feel comfortable. And what the band does is it hooks into the joint capsule. The capsule is the thing that often gets a bit rusty and stiff, and it biases that joint, allowing us to go a little bit further. And over time, it starts to give. So these bands are fantastic and an important piece of any stretching routine. So again, the idea with this, just to show from front on, is we're bending the ankle as far as you can, but we're not letting your knee cave in. We're trying to keep that knee out as far as you can without your toe or heel or foot lifting off. We're trying to stretch it out, not in a forward plane, but almost like a rotational plane, out sort of on a 45-degree angle, because your ankle has rotation in it. So if you don't rotate, then your body's always trying to find a way around that stiffness. And again, it can cause the calf muscle to tighten as it's trying to tolerate that change in load. So we just want to spend some time here. So you can stay here for 30 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever you feel comfortable with. You can oscillate in and out of that just to try and, in a nice way, force the joint to move better. But what you should hopefully feel immediately is you should feel like your ability to bend that ankle is better. You shouldn't feel like your calf is as tight. So taking off the handbrake in the ankle, taking off the handbrake in the lower back, generally the two underlying features for why a calf muscle will want to tighten in compensation. So once you are confident that you're addressing those things, we then obviously want to make sure that we're freeing up the calf itself. So as I said, this isn't an overly fancy way to stretch your calf, but what you can do is trying to get your heel as close to a wall or a corner as possible. And we're just trying to, keeping your legs straight, bring your hips over the top. So we're trying to close the distance between your hip and the wall or the door, whatever you've got. And you should feel at the back of that calf is some tightness. Now you can rotate your body to one side or the other just to hit different angles or different corners in that calf. Twisting towards your foot may sort of bias the outside of the calf. Going this way might be more on the inside. The different parts of that calf muscle can get tight. So make sure it's specific to what you feel. But what we're looking for here is once you find your calf tightness, we want to tense it up. We want to use this PNF stretching, this proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, or contract relax stretching. So you find some tension, take a deep breath in, squeeze, tense that calf muscle, push your toes, your foot back into the wall, whatever you want to do. Hold it for 5 to 10 seconds and then relax. And then you should genuinely feel like you've given yourself a little bit more range of motion. So same thing again, deep breath in, squeeze, tense that calf muscle, get your brain and nervous system involved. So maximal contraction so that when you relax it, you get a maximal relaxation and that tissue starts to give. Now, it's a great one to do off a step if you have one. But the idea here is that automatically, and we probably should have done this beforehand, but I don't know if the camera will pick this up very well, but so my left ankle comes back to here and my right one feels like it just goes further. So any stretching, as we said, should always have an immediate impact, because if it doesn't, then you haven't made a change. And one of the misconceptions with stretching is that you shouldn't have to stretch every day for 2 weeks or 6 weeks to start to feel more flexible. It should happen immediately. And if it's not, then you're wasting your time. Because if we're looking at this as trying to make stretching a thing you used to have to do, we can't get there if you have to take 6 weeks to feel like you're actually doing something. So by adding in the contract, relax, muscular stretching, the hold, relax, going further, hold, relax, going further, it should instantly give you more flexibility in those muscles. Going after the joint of your ankle with a band should instantly make you feel like the joint moves better. Going after the joints in your spine with a ball or a foam roller should instantly make you feel like your joints are moving better. Again, if you haven't felt that, you haven't made a difference. So either you haven't quite hit the right spot, or there's just a part of the exercise that you haven't quite done correctly. So, but we want to set a high standard, because clinically and when you see us, we want to make sure that you walk out feeling different. And if you don't, then you need to let us know, because you should. There should always be something going, something positive to hang your hat on. So in terms of the calf itself, the final thing just to touch on is we know that a stiff spine, a stiff ankle can be the catalyst that asks that calf muscle to tighten up in the first place. The two quick things to touch on to sort of reference a stiff back and a stiff ankle is why they become stiff. So if you're de-stiffening your back, de-stiffening your ankle, but still doing certain things that cause them to re-stiffen, then again, that cascade of events can keep that calf being tight. So just from personal experience, and clinical experience, the single biggest cause of ankle stiffness is heeled shoes or flip-flops or thongs, depending on where in the world you are. So any heeled shoe is the exact amount of ankle range you don't get access to. So we're not just talking a women's heel, we're talking like a men's business shoe, a running shoe, a sneaker. Anything that has a difference between the front of the shoe and the back of the shoe is bad for your ankle flexibility long term. And if you spend any length of time in those shoes, your ankle range of motion will start to reflect that over time. There's no way around it unless you're constantly trying to stretch your ankles and sort of stretching it more than it's stiffening. But ideally, we want everyone in a flat shoe if you have the mechanics to tolerate that. It's a story for another day, but just to plant that seed, a heeled shoe tends to rob you of that ankle stiffness, cause those calf muscles to tighten. Same thing with a flip-flop or a thong. Having to hold on to that with your big toe changes the mechanics of your foot, compromises the function of your arch, and as a result, the ankle joint gets stiff and the calf can get tight. So addressing those things is important to make sure that your ankle doesn't re-stiffen and your calf gets tight. And on the other side of the scale, when looking at a stiff back, the single most likely reason that your back is stiff is that you're just putting it in a less than ideal position. So we're talking sitting on the couch, driving, sitting on the work computer, even if you're sitting down having a coffee or a beer with your mates. The secret to eliminating back stiffness is to keep it in a good position. So most people stand in a good position, but as soon as they sit down, they just lose that shape and sink into the couch and they're lost for a couple of hours depending on what they're doing. Those joints get stiff over time because, again, they're being asked to based on the load that's going through them. So again, if you're trying to free your back up and you want to keep it loose, you've got to make sure that you're then backing that up with good positioning. Otherwise, it's just an uphill battle. So again, stretching a calf probably sounds a little bit more complicated than it should be, but ideally, just stretching your calf will never get rid of that muscular tightness unless you're having a conversation about the other things that ask that to be there. So hopefully that's some useful information. If you enjoy the video, please leave a like below. It just really helps support it and helps the channel grow, helps it sort of come across more people organically. And we'd appreciate if you consider subscribing as well, just so that you can be notified or you're more aware of seeing the content that we put out. We're trying to get through one each day or as close to that as possible. Again, basing on sort of real things that people talk about, real things that we talk about with patients in clinic. So again, if you have a specific issue that you're dealing with, please feel free to let us know. Either write it down in the comments or where this video is shared to, just let us know because we do read it and we will respond. And if it's a valuable piece of information, we'll make sure that we do a video on that as well. So appreciate you tuning in. Again, let us know how you go. But until next time, we'll see you soon.